Professor, sorry to interrupt.
Mhm.
Didn't go over chapter 5 yet.
Oh, you're from Thursday's lab, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, we will go over that in the lab.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, perfect.
Okay,
Thank you.
no problem. Thanks for reminding me, Jill. I do tend to forget some things every so often. All right, so the reason why I kind of went out of order is because this first chapter, it's easier to understand. There's a lot to memorize still, but it's easier to understand. I feel that chapter 4, when we dealing with tissues, that's a little bit harder to kind of grasp and understand, and hence why I wanted to do that first, so that you have more time to kind of process it and understand the material. And this stuff that we're learning today, although important, it's easier to understand. It's basically memorization for this stuff here. Okay. So the first thing here, when we look at the word anatomy, it's just the study of structure. We're looking at things on the body and naming them and being able to see what they are. As we look into physiology, which you may end up taking next semester, it will be understanding what it does. Okay, so its function. Okay, there is another term that's similar to anatomy. It's called morphology, and it's the study of form. It's pretty interchangeable for the most part, but they are very similar to each other. Okay, lab tests. Yes, the models that we go over in lab will be on the lab exam, correct? We are going to finish chapter 4. Yes, for Thursday's lab, we will finish chapter 4 and 5 today in lab. Okay. And the thing about this relationship between anatomy and physiology is that form always has the function always have a particular form. Form and function always are related to each other. What do I mean by that? Okay, so the anatomy of the heart, right? Its form, the heart has a particular structure to it. It has these chambers, as you can see here, and the chambers are there so that it could hold blood and then pump it out. Okay, so they have these chambers here. So it has this form of having these chambers to cause the function to pump this blood out, basically. Okay, so form always has a function to it. So there's this relationship that will be going over and over again, that anatomy and its physiology are related to each other. There are different types of anatomy. One is microscopic anatomy. And for microscopic anatomy, we need something to help us see these structures. We can't see it with our naked eye. And then there's gross anatomy or macroscopic anatomy. And for this one, this we could actually see without any tools. We can actually see things, okay? And then there's other branches of anatomy as well. And for this, this is going to be just other divisions or how we categorize different types of anatomy. Okay, so once again, microscopic anatomy is we need something to help us see these smaller structures. Okay. The first one is the study of tissue, which we've been looking at in the chapter 4 tissues chapter is histology, right? And it's how we look at these tissues and identify them and so on and so forth. Okay. Anybody remember what is that suffix for cell? What is another word or suffix for the word cell? Anybody remember? Yeah, site. Very good. So to study cells, instead of using histology, by the way, ology over here means the study of. Okay, and this is tissue, right? So for the study of cells, we still have the ology part of it, right? Study of the site is cell. Okay, so for cytology, we're looking at the cell and its internal structures as well. Good. Okay, so these are different types of microscopic anatomy. Now we're going to go into the gross anatomy or the macroscopic anatomy. Okay, there's different ways of looking at macroscopic anatomy. One is systemic anatomy, and this is what we're going to be doing for the rest of our entire semester. We're going to look at the structures by organ systems, hence the name systemic, right? We're looking at each organ system. You may not know what an organ system is, but we'll get to there in a couple slides. Or you could look at it as a regional anatomy. And for the most part, we won't be doing this, but there are other schools or whatnot that may end up looking at anatomy regionally. So this is different because you're looking at different regions of the body and looking at everything in that region. So for example, if you were to look at someone's arm, right, you're not only going to study the skin, but you're also studying the muscles and the bones and the blood vessels and the nerves all going to that arm, okay, at the same time, kind of thing. Once again, in our class, we're going to be going through it organ system by organ system, though. Okay. And then there's surface anatomy, and we will talk more about surface anatomy, I think, in the next unit, just to look at certain structures of it. But with surface anatomy, this is when we could see the structures without actually going into the person, basically. So it's whatever we could actually visibly see on the person. Okay, then these are the other schools of anatomy. Okay, one is developmental anatomy. Like the name implies, this is looking at the changes that occur as we develop, right? When we get born all the way until we die.
Sorry to, can you go back?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you go back to the other slide, please?
Yeah, sure. And part of developmental anatomy is called embryology. Okay, embryology is still kind of part of the development, but this is the development that occurs before we are born. So as we are an embryo. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So embryology is as we develop, but within the womb. Pathology anatomy, we have to understand what the word pathology means, is something that causes a disease. So we're looking at an anatomy not in its normal form, but actually in its diseased form, and seeing that and comparing that with the normal form. When we look at radiographic anatomy, now we're using some kind of device to take pictures or images of our body, such like this X-ray image over here. Okay, and you could see the different structures as we look at it through this type of imaging. Then we have functional anatomy, and this, once again, remember when we think about the word function, this is more regarding to physiology. So we're looking at the functional properties of how the body structures work. And then we have comparative anatomy, and this one is more like looking at different species and comparing and contrasting those structures of different species with the human, of each other, basically, not necessarily the human, just depends on what you're comparing, which organisms you're comparing it with. All right, so that's the different types of anatomy. Now we're going to go into the hierarchy of how we organize the different types of structures. Can tomography and radiography anatomy be mentioned interchangeably? Good question. I'm not entirely sure about that, Alex. I may need to look that up.
Going back to the other slide just so I could finish copying it.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Anyone else having issues with audio or? Yeah, the slides are going to be online. I leave them up as videos. So if you happen to miss something, you can always go back to the video and look at it. Huh, interesting. Marlon, I don't know if maybe the internet that your connection with the internet, that's my guess, I'm not sure. All right, let's take a look at the hierarchy of how things are structured. The other thing you could do, Marlon, is you could look at review the videos as well, and hopefully when you do it that way, it's not as choppy. Okay, so we look at the atoms. And the atoms is the smallest particle of matter. And then as we end up having atoms linking up to each other, then we have something called a molecule. Okay, so this is a carbon atom over here on the very left-hand side, okay? And this is DNA, okay? And then if we look at these molecules and start looking at the cytology, the study of the cell, anybody remember what organelle / whatever structure within the cell contains the DNA?
The nucleus.
Yeah, nucleus, very good. So we'll find this DNA in the nucleus here, okay? So organelles are these structures within the cell and they perform a particular function. So when you have all these other structures in the cell, they make up the cell itself, okay? Not that cell, okay? Like when I talk about cell, I'm talking about the cell, the living cell, the smallest unit of life, okay? If you have multiple cells working together, you should be able to figure this out, right? If you have multiple cells to perform a function, what do you call that? You've been studying it in the last chapter, right? Yeah, very good. Or it's tissues. It'll be tissues. Yeah. However, if you have multiple tissues working together, now you have an organ, yes. After you have multiple tissues working together to perform a similar function. And earlier on, we were talking about organ systems, right? So, okay, so let me just go back a little bit. So here's one cell, right? Here's one cell, okay? Over here, we have a tissue. Can you tell what kind of tissue is this for those of you who are from Monday or Tuesday's lab? Anybody could recall what kind of tissue this is?
Muscle tissue?
Yeah, it's a muscle tissue, very good. Can you tell what kind of muscle tissue is it? Okay, so here are some clues I'm going to give you, right? This is striated. Okay, not only is it striated, but it's also branched as well. And these are the huge clues for it right here.
Cardiac muscle?
Yeah, this is cardiac muscles. The darker lines that you see here are what we call, they're gap junctions, right? These are called the intercalated discs that help them communicate with each other. Very good. Yeah. So this here, if I say identify this tissue, you put down cardiac muscle. And so we said that if you have all this cardiac muscle working together, and you'll end up having this organ here, the heart. What if you talk about not only the heart, but other organs that work together with the heart, like the arteries, the veins, the capillaries, and things like that? Yeah, that would be the organ system. Anybody know what the organ system is called regarding to the heart and the blood vessels and blood?
Cardiac system?
Yeah, almost. You have the cardiac part. You're absolutely right. I have the cardiac because it's the heart. It's the vascular part that we're missing because that contains the blood vessels with it too, kind of thing. So for the organ system, we'll have both the heart and the blood vessels as well. So just out of preference, if you could just type out your answers just so that it gives other people a chance to answer as well. I appreciate that you guys are calling it out and that's awesome. But just for the lecture part of it, if you could just type out your answers, that would be, I think it would help in general. Thank you. And then if you talk about all the organ systems together, right? Whether it's the cardiovascular system, we just learned about the skin and all the different organs related to the skin. Anybody remember what that organ system is? Monday, Tuesday lab, that is? What is that organ system that contains the skin and the nails, hair? Yes, it's the integumentary system. Very good. Okay, the integumentary system, the nervous system, muscular system, when they all work together, then we have this complete individual called the organism. And when you start getting other organisms of the same species together, then we have something called the population. Okay. Once you start involving other species, now you have something called communities. And notice all these are living organisms living together. Okay. Once you end up containing things that are non-living with it, like the air, like the rocks and whatnot type of thing, now we have something called the ecosystem. Okay. And if we're talking about all the different ecosystems in the world, then we have something called biosphere. You don't see it here, but this is called the biosphere. Okay, I'll write it down for those of you who are biosphere. Okay, this is when all the ecosystems are working together to make our world, basically. All right, so that's how we organize it by hierarchy. Hierarchy means from the simplest to the most complex type of thing. For the most part, for anatomy, what we're going to be looking at is from the organelles all the way to the organism type of thing. Okay, so for the most part, this is chapter 2 stuff, right? When we look at the organelles, a little bit about the cells for chapter 2. But the rest of the anatomy we'll be looking at in this semester. So let's just focus on the organ systems for right now. Okay, we just learned about the integumentary system for those from Monday and Tuesday. So what its function is for protection, right? It protects us from UV radiation, if we're talking about the melanocytes producing melanin, or our hair protecting our scalp. It's also helping with thermal regulation when we talk about the eccrine glands, the sweat glands, to help evaporate and cool our body, or the blood vessels going to our skin. The skeletal system, on the other hand, we will learn in the next unit, and it helps with support, protection, right? It protects, like, if we talk about the skull, right? It protects our brain, the sternum protects our heart, so on and so forth. And also movement. Movement because, you know, bones and bones are stuck together. And when they're stuck together with what kind of tissue? Does anybody remember what kind of tissue?
Ligaments?
Yeah, ligaments will end up combining bones together. Anybody remember what type of tissue are ligaments made out of, though? Yeah, it's connective tissue. What kind of connective tissue, though? What kind of connective tissue? I see some answers here. It is dense, regular connective tissue. Dense, regular connective tissue. Okay. But skeletal system usually works in conjunction with the next organ system called the muscular system.
But I hope you leave enough room for my fist, because I'm going to ram it into your stomach.
And so with the muscular system, we have these muscles that attach to the skeleton. And when they contract, it provides movement. It also helps with thermal regulation as well. Anybody know how it helps with thermal regulation? Well, first of all, do you remember what thermal regulation means? Thermal meaning temperature. How does it regulate our temperature? Yeah, it contracts, right? When we're cold, we contract because we're shivering. And by doing that, contracting, it provides more warmth in our body. It increases our body temperature. Very good. Okay, our nervous system helps with communication. Okay, it uses nerves to communicate. Oops, sorry. Uses our nerves to communicate. And it helps response to stimulus. Stimulus is some kind of change in the environment that the nervous system will detect. Okay. And something similar to the nervous system is the endocrine system, but it's different because it doesn't use nerves. Instead, it uses hormones, right? And do you remember what produces those hormones again? What do you call those structures that produces hormones? We learned it when we talked about the epithelial tissue. Yeah, the glands. And let's be a little bit more specific, right? What kind of glands are we talking about when we talk about the ones that produces hormones? Exocrine glands, or the other one is called the endocrine glands, right? And since this is the endocrine system, it will be the endocrine glands. Remember, the endocrine glands are going to be different from the exocrine glands because the endocrine glands, they don't have, yeah, they are ductless, right? They don't have a duct, okay? While the exocrine glands do have ducts. Okay, good. And because they don't have a duct, they need to release the hormones into our bloodstream. Cardiovascular system, we kind of already talked about, right? It contains the heart, the blood, and the blood vessels. And their main function is to transport nutrients, waste, gases, the hormones, so on and so forth. Something similar to the cardiovascular system is the lymphatic system. It's similar because there are vessels as well called lymphatic vessels to transport something called lymph instead. And a lot of our immune organs are from the lymphatic system as well. So here, since they both are transporting some sort of liquid, right? This transport blood, this transport lymph. Sometimes you'll see this combined together. If you do see it combined together, they call it the circulatory system. It's called the circulatory system because it circulates fluids, whether it's blood or lymph. Next is the respiratory system. And the respiratory system, I think most of you already know, is to exchange gas, right? So that oxygen could get into our blood and for carbon dioxide to be breathed out because it's a waste product. Our digestive system, on the other hand, is to break down food. We break down the food that we eat so we can get the nutrients from that food. The urinary system, it will end up filtering our blood. And after it filters our blood, it will excrete whatever waste that were from our blood. Okay. If you remember, for those that are Monday and Tuesday, what were those wastes called? Well, at least one of the wastes called is a nitrogenous waste. Yeah, it was called urea. And then we have the reproductive system. And with the reproductive system, it produces gametes. The word gametes is a fancy way of saying sex cells. So males, they produce sperm. Females, they will produce the eggs or ova. And the whole function of it is to continue our species. All right, so these are all the different organ systems that we'll be going over throughout the semester. So the next one here is a question here. And let's go ahead and have you answer this. Let me see. I go back and give you the link for those of you who didn't have the link from before. I could find it, that is. Where is the link here?
Looks like somebody put it in the chat.
Oh, so thank you. Yeah, and it should be up. I think I already have it up, so you could start answering from there. Remember, the room is Anson, so if you could go to room Anson. Yeah, thank you. And let me get the, where did it go? The slide over here. Oops. See if you could answer this question for now. All right, I think most of you have already answered it. And here is the results of it. Okay, so I see a lot of A's and a couple of BCDs and a few E's. Okay, so let's take a look at this question. Okay, and the question is asking what level of structural organization is the following picture representing? Okay, so it's asking for the structural organization, right? And most of you wrote A and you said it's skeletal, right? But what is the skeletal system, right? The skeletal system is a specific type of organ system, right? Is it asking for a specific type of organ system? No, it's not asking for a specific type of organ system. It's saying what level of structural organization is it, okay? So we have to say that, okay, is it an organ? No, it has more than just one organ, right? Kind of thing. It has multiple organs in this particular one. It's not the organism either because it's more than one organ. It's only one organ. Okay, let me repeat that. It's not an organism because it doesn't have all the organ systems to it. It's only one organ system. It's not a tissue because it's more than just cells being put together. Okay, so the correct answer for this is E, is the organ system. Kind of the reason why I put this one up here is please read the questions carefully because the question will be asking for a specific answer, right, kind of thing. And you may end up having some of these questions on your exam. Not I don't know how many, but I'm just saying like that's why I want you to pay attention to the question as well. Don't just go by, okay, I know exactly what it is just by looking at it. Read the questions first and make sure you're answering the question.
Professor?
Yeah,
I'm still like, there's only bone, so okay, like I'm still confused.
Okay, so remember how we talked about the hierarchy, right? We said that there's tissues, we say atoms first, but I'm just going to start with the tissues, right? The tissues, they will, when they function together, they'll make an organ, right? And an organ is just like the heart. In this case, it will be the femur or the humerus or the ulna or the radius, so on and so forth, right? But if you have all those working together, the skull, femur, or ulna, radius, all together, then you have the organ system, which is the skeleton, which this is, right? This is the skeleton, okay? And then if you have the skeletal system working with the muscular system, working with the nervous system, and so on and so forth, then you have something called the organism, the complete individual. Okay?
Oh, okay, I get it now. Thank you.
So this is just the organ system. All right, let's continue on. Okay, next is anatomical positioning. Let me try to get that. I'm not sure. Let me. Oh, I think I know how to do this. Okay, stop share. Let me redo the sharing. that little line was getting annoying for me. All right, so if we look at the anatomical position, this is the anatomical position when we look at a person, right? He'll be standing like this. Sorry, give me a second. Trying to get the chat back up so I could see what people are saying. Okay. All right, so this is how we refer to the body. Okay, in all cases scenario, whether the person is lying down or face down or sitting or standing, we're always going to refer to body as if the person is standing. Okay. All right, so so standing is one of the features when we talk about the anatomical position. Their feet has to be flat on the ground, the arms are to their side, and they are supinated. When I mean they are supinated, okay, it means that the palms are facing forward, okay? The palms are facing anteriorly. That means that the radius and ulna are going to be parallel with each other as well, okay? All right, so if you look at this here, there is something called pronation, okay? And we will learn these terms again, but I do want you to know it as of now as well. Okay, so supination is when the palms are facing forward, right? So everyone, you could probably look at your hand, and if it's facing forward, that's when it's supinated. Now, if you turn your hand around and you see the back side of your hand, that means that it's pronated, okay? And this is when the radius and ulna will cross over. Okay. One way to remember this that I don't know how I learned it was supinated is as if when you're holding soup, right? When you hold soup, right, your palms are facing anteriorly. Okay. So that's supination. Okay. So in anatomical position, it will be supinated. It's not going to be pronated, but I'm putting this term here just so that you know that's the opposite of supination. When we refer to the right and left, we always refer to the right and left of our patient or cadaver, okay? Never on yourself. So if I were to say, is this the right or left hand? What is your answer? Yeah, that would be the right hand, okay? It's always the patient's right hand, that person's right hand. So if you want to kind of think about it, okay, what if you're that person? Which hand will it be? Okay, it will be the right hand, okay? So if you were that person, okay? So you have to get started to think of that naturally whenever you see your patient and stuff. It's very important, right? So if someone goes in and needs to remove their right kidney, right? You don't want to accidentally remove their left kidney, right? If the right one is the one that needs to be surgically removed. All right, so here, let's take a look at these directional terms. So the directional terms, that means towards your belly, okay, is ventral. When you're talking about towards your back, that's dorsal, okay? So if a person is facing this way, let's just say, okay, here's a person, and they are facing this way here, like my drawing. Okay, so ventral will be this direction, and dorsal will be this direction, okay? However, there is something called anterior, okay? Anterior is the direction of when you're walking, okay? So guess what? With us, ventral is in the same direction as anterior, because when we walk forwards, right? Posterior, on the other hand, will be walking backwards, okay? So this will be the posterior. So you'll notice that in this case scenario, anterior and ventral will be synonymous with each other. Okay, posterior and dorsal will be synonymous with each other as well. Okay, so to be aware with that, because it will be different when we talk about a four-legged animal.
Okay.
Hey, Professor, for ventral, wouldn't it be pointing toward the midline of the body?
No, that'll be something else, and we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, if you're towards the midline, it'll be called medial. Okay, cephalic, on the other hand, means towards the head. So in this case scenario, cephalic would be towards the head, right? And then caudal means towards the tail. There is another word that means, oh, sorry, I'll get to that other word in a second. If we're talking about regarding to just the head, then this part is called rostral, means towards the nose. And so when I was going to say this one first, okay? So here, going above or to the top is called superior, while going below is called inferior. So similar to ventral and anterior, they're going in the same direction. Superior and cephalic are going in the same direction. Inferior and caudal are going in the same direction. But that is to us for a two-legged animal, okay? It's going to be different when we start talking about a four-legged animal. Because in a four-legged animal, now we're going to have different directions. Let's try to figure this out, okay? So if we're talking about a four-legged animal, ventral, what does ventral mean? Towards the belly, right? So over here, ventral will be, their belly is towards in this direction, right? When we talk about towards their spine or backside, and so this is going to be their dorsal. But we said, what was that other term when we say going towards the top? What's that term going towards the top mean? Yeah, it's going to be superior. Notice how, and this is going to be inferior down here. Notice how things have changed now, right? Superior is still superior. Superior is still superior. Dorsal is still dorsal towards the spine, but notice the direction is different than a two-legged animal, okay? So dorsal is going to be in this direction when we talk about two-legged animal, but dorsal in a four-legged animal will be in this direction. So in this direction here, if they're walking forwards, this is still anterior, so this hasn't changed, right? But in this direction is towards their head. So this is going to be called cephalic as well. Going this direction is still posterior, but this is going towards their tail. So this would be caudal. Okay. So definition-wise, nothing has changed, but direction-wise, things have changed if we're talking about dorsal, ventral, cephalic, and caudal. Here's another one, medial. Medial is the one that's towards the midline. Okay, that's medial. And the opposite of that is going to be lateral. Okay, going away from the midline. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and erase this so we can actually see the next columns here. Okay, intermediate means between the structures. Here's another one that I want to go over. Okay, so there are things that I'm not going to go over just because of time's sake, since I think those are easier terms for you to understand. But I'll go over the things that I feel are going to be a little bit tougher to understand. I would, Nicole, since I covered it, I would maybe go over it just, we're going to be using these terms on a two-legged animal, right, for humans. So for the most part, we're going to be using it for a human, but maybe there will be a question, you know, maybe one question or so regarding to a four-legged animal, okay? But I'm not sure what's on my study guide, but the study guide will be more specific about it, okay? Proximal, it means towards the attachment point, okay? So when we're going this direction, this is proximal, okay? Same thing as when we were talking about our legs too. So in going this direction, this is proximal. Going in the opposite direction, now we call it distal. Okay, so in the opposite direction, this is distal. Okay, going away. So you got to think about it. Okay, so your elbow compared to your hand. Your elbow is what compared to your hand? Your elbow is over here, right? Compared to your hand. Your elbow is going to be more proximal, right? More proximal compared to your hand. Okay. I could reverse it, right? Your hand is what compared to your elbow? Now your hand is more distal, right? Your hand is going to be more distal compared to your elbow. Good. Superficial, pretty obvious. Deep is pretty obvious. Contralateral means going onto the opposite side, okay? So your right eye is contralateral to your left hand, okay? Or your left foot is contralateral to your right hand, okay? So that's what contralateral means. Ipsilateral means on the same side. So your right eye is going to be ipsilateral to your right hand, which is also ipsilateral to your right foot, but it's contralateral to your left foot.
Professor, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Regarding the last slide and like when you're asking like if the elbow was distal or proximal, would you have to feel like it was distal or proximal to like the trunk or the shoulder or just
Yeah, good question. It's always towards the point of attachment. So this is where our appendages are attached to, right? These are the locations where it attaches to. So we're always looking at in reference to where it attaches to the body.
Thank you.
So right eye would be contralateral to your left arm. Correct. Good. Okay, so these are the axial regions. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these terms here. When we talk about the frontal region is your forehead. Your occipital region is going to be the back of your head. Your facial region is going to be your face. Okay, your facial region will have different regions within it. Okay. And when we talk about mental, okay, don't get confused with the forehead mental, because the forehead here, we already said the frontal. Your mental is your chin over here. So my anatomy teachers are like, okay, maybe you could remember it as, you know, when someone's trying to think about something, they will be stroking their mental region, right? As they're stroking their mental region, they're thinking about something. So you could think of mental as being the chin. And then you have otic or auricular, and that means the ear. Okay, so.
Professor, I just had a question in general. You have some like otic and ocular. Would both answers be correct on a lab or an exam? Or?
Yes, yes, you're absolutely right. If it was a lab, in this case scenario, we're not covering this in the lab, so it's not going to be in the lab. On lecture exam, I could use either one, so you have to at least recognize it in lecture. In the lab, if this was a lab term, then if you put one or the other, I'll totally accept it.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, let's see what we have here. Okay, so why do I have umbilical? I'm pretty sure most of you know umbilical is over here, but that's the umbilical region over here. Let me see, but this part I think is a little bit harder to understand. The perineal region is going to be the inferior side of your pelvic floor. So this is your perineal region right here, okay? So it's not really depicted really well in your textbook, because your perineal region, I think in your textbook, all they do is kind of point to this area here, but it doesn't really show it to you, okay? So this picture here shows you your perineal region. And then you have the lumbar region. Okay, so lumbar is known as this region here on your back, right? But not only is it on your back, when we look at the lumbar region, when we talk about the different regions of the abdominal pelvic regions, then it is also these regions over here. So we'll take a look at that in a different context in another slide or two. And sacral is pretty obvious as well. Okay. Once again, the reason why I'm skipping some of these because I feel like they're really easy to understand and it's all just memorization. I'm just going over points that I feel are a little bit confusing. Okay. So scapular is just this region over here where your shoulder blades are located at. Cubital region. Okay, so this one I want to go over because it depends on how we're going to be looking at it. Okay, overall, the cubital region is this region, both anteriorly and posteriorly. Okay, do we need to memorize the chart in the notes? Whatever is going to be on your study guide. So if the chart has terms from the study guide, then yes. Okay, if the chart doesn't have any terms from the study guide, then don't worry about it. Okay, most likely, if I'm recalling what the chart you're talking about, I'm thinking that yes, most of the terms you need to know, whatever's that's on the study guide. That okay. All right, so cubital region is this region here, but it's both anteriorly and posteriorly. If, for example, you're just looking on the anterior side, now we could say this here specifically is called the antecubital region. Okay. Overall, it's called the cubital, but if we want to be a little bit more specific, now it's called the antecubital. If we look at the posterior side, then we have what we call the olecranon region, okay, the olecranon region, the elbow basically. It's the olecranon region. And when we talk about the digitals, the digitals are the fingers, okay? But if we're talking about specifically the thumbs, then it's the pollex, okay? The pollex will have a different from the hallux, which is the big toe. Okay, now let's go to the lower extremity. Patellar is the knee, okay? However, if you look at the posterior side of it, then we have something called the popliteal. Okay. Yeah, thank you. It's in the first module if you want to take a look at the lectures. Crural is overall, we're talking about the leg, okay, overall. But if we want to be a little bit more specific, just the posterior side of the leg, then we call it sural, okay? If we're looking at the lateral side of the leg, then we're going to be calling it the fibular or perennial, okay? Either one of those works. But overall, crural is the entire leg, both anterior and posterior side. Sural is specifically the posterior side. And we said earlier on, hallux is the big toe. What was the thumb's name again? What was that other region of the thumb's name again? Yeah, very good. Okay.
So I have a question, Professor. I wrote it in the chat, but it got lost. So, okay, on the study guide, it says what regions are found within the lower extremities. Oh, what regions are part of the lower extremities appendages? So I would write appendicular region, correct?
Repeat your question again. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. So it says what regions are part of the lower extremities / appendages, right?
So it'll be all these regions here that we just covered here.
Okay, okay.
All of them are going to be part of the lower extremities.
Okay, cool. Gotcha. Thank you.
No problem. All right, so let's take a look at these quadrants now, okay? there are these 4 quadrants of the abdominal region, okay? You do need to know some of these organs though, okay? So if I say, what organs will you find in the upper right quadrant, okay? The upper right, right upper quadrant, I apologize, but the right upper quadrant, you'll find, over here, you'll find a liver, right? Majority of the liver will be in the right upper quadrant. The gallbladder as well, very good, okay. If I say, how about the left upper quadrant? What can you find there, right? For that one, you'll be able to find the spleen over here. Majority of the stomach will be on the left upper quadrant, okay. Be careful with the diaphragm. The diaphragm actually covers both quadrants here, okay. So the diaphragm, although it's labeled on this left side over here, it is on both sides, okay. So this is on both, okay. So don't put just diaphragm, although the diaphragm is found there as well, but it's also found on the right hand side. And if we talk about right lower quadrant, now you can see that there is the cecum. The cecum is just this area of the large intestine, while the appendix is going to be over here, okay. By the way, just an FYI, all these pictures that I'm showing you and everything, this is for, in general, what it will look like in most people's bodies. The reason why I say most people's body, some people's bodies will have it completely in reverse, where everything that's on the right-hand side normally will be on the left-hand side and things like that. And sometimes, you know, the kidneys, they will actually become one kidney as well. So there are going to be these differences in people. So what we study here is going to be in most people, but not in every single person. All right, so those are the quadrants, right? Now let's look at the different regions of the abdominal region here, okay? So we can either put diaphragm on right upper quadrant. Yes, you could put the diaphragm as right upper quadrant and also the left upper quadrant, right? So it's both, right? That we could see that. I said the cecum is going to be on the right lower quadrant, right lower quadrant for cecum. Okay. Yeah, if I say specifically what's only found in this quadrant, or maybe I would rephrase it, what's mostly found in this quadrant, then the diaphragm will not be a great answer to answer that. Yeah. All right, so here, let's take a look at these, okay? So let's see if you understand some of these terms. Some of you might know what this is because we talked about it in Monday and Tuesday's lab. Hypo meaning, anybody remember what the term hypo means? Yeah, underneath or lower, good, under. Anybody remember what con means? C-H-O, like when I say chondrocyte, very good, okay, chondrocyte. This is going to be cartilage. Okay, so this means that it's underneath the cartilage. What cartilage are we talking about if we're talking about this region over here, this right hypochondriac region here? What cartilage? Yeah, it's the costal cartilage, right? The costal cartilage is here. Costal meaning ribs, right? So this is the region underneath the ribs here. Underneath the cartilage of the ribs, okay? So here is the right hypochondriac region. And same thing this, right? Left hypochondriac region over there. Epi, do you remember what epi means? Yeah, above or on top or on the surface. Do you remember what gastric means? What does gastric mean? Yeah, this is going to be the stomach, right? So this is going to be above the stomach, right? So this is on the surface, above the stomach here. Okay, good. Right lumbar region, we kind of talked about, and left lumbar region over here, okay? Umbilical region, pretty obvious, right? It's over here, okay? And then we have the right inguinal and also the left inguinal. Okay, so the right inguinal is over here, left inguinal over here. And in between is the pubic region, also known as the hypogastric region. Okay, that one's a little bit more confusing because you'll think, okay, yeah, but isn't the umbilical below the stomach as well? Yeah, you're right as well, but that I prefer the pubic one because it's a little bit more obvious between the two terms here. But once again, I could ask you, okay, where is the appendix and cecum located at? And your answer will be, yeah, the right iliac or inguinal region. Very good. Okay, good. All right, next we'll be looking at these anatomical planes here. And these are different sections or cuts of the body. So when we talk about section, it's an actual cut. And when we talk about these planes, these are imaginary cuts. So the sagittal plane, it will cut the body into right and left. Okay, it'll separate the body rights and lefts. If we say straight down the midline, okay, that will be a specific mid-sagittal plane or a mid-sagittal section, okay? That's specifically right down the midline, so it makes it separated equally on the right and left side. Yes, Joseph, if you're looking on the posterior side, it will be the exact same name. Remember, we're always referring it to the anatomical position. Whether we're looking at it in the front, on the back, if the person's sitting down, laying face flat on the ground, it will always be referred as the anatomical position, as if they were standing, palms facing forward, feet flat on the ground, so on and so forth. Chapter 2 quiz is not going to be proctored. It's one of the few, and also the pre-lecture quizzes are not proctored. It will actually have a parentheses saying like proctored next to the exam if it was proctored. Okay, so the only ones that are proctored are going to be your exams that are on your syllabus. Look at your schedule of the syllabus. And the only one that's not mentioned on your syllabus that's also proctored is histo quiz number 2, but I'll let you know about that when we get there. Okay. So everything else is open notes and open book except for the proctored one. Proctored ones, no notes, no anything. It'll be as if you're taking an exam in class. All right, so let's take a look at the parasagittal planes are all the other sagittal planes except for the mid-sagittal plane. So anything that's not on the midline is called the parasagittal plane. And then we have the coronal plane or frontal plane. And this one's going to separate things anteriorly and posteriorly. So this one will separate it by cutting it like this, separate anteriorly and posteriorly. When we cut things like this, now we're separating things superiorly and inferiorly. And it's also known as a cross section. So if you take a look at this transverse section here, it's also known as a cross section. Anything that's in an angle that doesn't fit any of these other planes that we just mentioned is called oblique section. All right, let's test you and see whether or not you understand these particular sections / planes. Okay, let's take a look at this first one here. What kind of section is this? This is a, yeah, coronal or frontal section. Very good, okay, good. How about this type of section here?
I don't know if it's just me, but there's a video like in the way. I can't see anything.
What video in the way?
If only I knew. It looks like lasers and so what happens after the person got lasered? You'll notice that
he got sliced up, right? And after he got sliced up, what kind of section is that?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Yeah, what kind of
Yep.
section is that? That's an oblique section. Yeah, very good. How about this right here? What kind of section is this here? Yeah, this is going to be called the mid-sagittal. Yeah, mid-sagittal section. Oh, let me see if you could spell it correctly. When we talk about mid-sagittal section, how do you write, how do you spell the word sagittal, right? How many G's, how many T's, right? So make sure you know that there are 2 T's and only 1 G, okay? How about this type of section here? What kind of section is this? Yeah, this is going to be a transverse section. Yeah, very good. Good, good, good. All right. All right, next we'll go into the different body cavities. Okay, there's the dorsal cavity. Dorsal, once again, means towards the spine, or also known as the posterior when we're talking about walking backwards, right? Versus ventral cavity, which is towards the belly, or anterior if it's towards the direction that we're walking, right? So, so these are the 2 dorsal and ventral cavities that you'll need to know. And within these, they'll have different types of cavities as well. And we'll go into the specific ones next, okay? So over here, the posterior cavity will have the cranial cavity. It's called the cranial cavity because that's where the brain is going to be located at. Yeah, cut at the angle is oblique. Thank you for those that answered. The vertebral cavity here, or spinal canal here, is going to be housing the spinal cord. Okay, both of these are dorsal body cavities. Now let's take a look on the anterior side. Oh, I guess not yet. We'll take a look at the serous membrane first, okay? The serous membrane, those of you from Monday and Tuesday lab, you should be able to tell me what tissues are found in the serous membrane. What are the tissues found in the serous membrane, also known as the serosa? Yeah, there will be connective tissue. Let's be a little bit more specific as to what kind of epithelial or connective tissue we're talking about. Yeah, there is a lot to remember. Yeah, this course is a lot of information that you'll need to remember. Yeah, hence why you have to spend a few hours each day. Remember how I said you need at least like 12 to 20 hours to study outside of this course. This is a lot to remember. But the thing is that once you go into your, like if you're going to nursing school or whatever school afterwards, you're going to look back onto anatomy and go like, man, anatomy was so much easier compared to what I'm learning now kind of thing. So just pace yourself. It's kind of like a marathon, right? You want to pace yourself and you'll get there, but you have to put in hours each day, okay? Don't wait until that week or weekend before the exam. It's not going to happen. Okay. Okay, so areolar connective tissue is correct. Okay, areolar connective tissue is one of those tissues. And also, what type of epithelium, though? It's simple squamous epithelium, okay? There are 2 layers of the serous membrane. The parietal layer surrounds the walls, body walls. Okay, what I mean by that is think of your lungs, right? You have the lungs itself, and then you have the rib cage, you know, that touches the lungs and stuff. The parietal layer is the one that's behind your rib cage on the posterior side of your ribs there, or anterior if we're talking about the posterior side of the rib itself kind of thing. But it lines within the rib cage itself, not on the outside, but the deeper one. Okay. And then there's a serous cavity in between. The serous cavity is where the serous fluid is going to be located at. So there's this little space in between the parietal layer and the visceral layer. Within the cavity here, it produces this fluid, and the fluid is there to help lubricate that location so it decreases the friction. So whenever we breathe, or whenever our heart pumps, or whenever our abdominal organs ends up moving around, it prevents the friction from occurring. It prevents it rubbing against the walls. The visceral layer is the outside of that organ, though, the very outer layer of the organ. So if we're looking at this picture here, the parietal layer is this layer right here. This outer layer is the parietal layer. Okay, you have this serous fluid and in the serous cavity here. And then you have this membrane that's covering the person's fist over here, and that's the visceral layer. Okay, so you have two layers, right? I'll go ahead and just color that in for you. Okay, you have the parietal layer and visceral layer. And in between these two layers is the cavity here. So there are different types of serous membranes. Okay, the one around the lungs is called the pleura. So the outer layer of the lungs, the serous membrane that's on the outer surface of the lung is going to be called the visceral pleura. If we're talking about the layer that's touching behind the ribs here, that's going to be called the parietal pleura. And if we're talking about the space in between, then we have the pleural cavity. And these are similar when we talk about the heart. If we're talking about the outside of the heart, okay, the one that's the outer surface of the heart, then we call that the visceral pericardium. If we're talking about this other layer that's surrounding the heart, on the walls of the heart, then we call it the parietal pericardium. Oops. And in between is called the pericardial cavity. Okay, so you're just using these terms over and over again. And for the abdominal and pelvic regions, we use peritoneum instead. So visceral peritoneum, parietal peritoneum, and peritoneal cavity. Okay. The visceral is the outside of the organ. It's the outer layer of the organ itself. The parietal is on the walls that surrounds that organ. That's the difference between the two. Okay. The ventral cavity is this cavity here above the diaphragm. Okay, so sorry, I meant thoracic cavity is above the diaphragm, but these are all ventral cavity. Remember, ventral cavity is everything on the anterior side. So if we're specifically talking about the ventral cavity that's above the diaphragm, that's the thoracic cavity here. Thoracic cavity. Anything below the diaphragm is going to be called the abdominal pelvic cavity, and we'll get to that in a second. But in the thoracic cavity, there are different cavities within it, or different regions in it as well. So let's take a look at these here. So first off, we have the mediastinum. Mediastinum is anything between the lungs here. So anything between the lungs is called the mediastinum. Pericardium, like we said, means around the heart. So the pericardium is located over here, right? We have the parietal pericardium, which is lines on the walls of the heart. And then we have a cavity that is in between the visceral and parietal pericardium. The visceral pericardium is the outer layer of the heart. The pleura is regarding to the lungs. So we have the part that lines the walls of the lungs, okay, within the rib cage and everything. That's called the parietal pleura. And then the outer layer of the lungs itself is called the visceral pleura. And in between, we have the pleural cavity. Okay, now we go underneath the diaphragm, and this is called the abdominal pelvic cavity. The abdominal cavity will be the majority of it and be the superior portion of it. Anything below the hip bones now is going to be called the pelvic cavity, specifically just this region over here. So that's the abdominal pelvic cavity. But the peritoneum is the serous membrane that covers the abdominal organs and pelvic organs here. Once again, the parietal peritoneum is lining the walls of the abdominal pelvic cavity. The visceral peritoneum is on the surface on many of the abdominal pelvic organs. And in between, there's this cavity between it, and it's called the peritoneal cavity. All right. Going back and seeing microscopy, remember we're using some kind of instrument to help us identify some of these smaller structures we can't see with our eyes. So we have something called a light microscope, and this is what we're going to be using for our histology. It just uses light as its source, a light source here. But if we want to see things even smaller, they use electrons instead. And then you have different types of electron microscopes. You have transmission electron the transmission electron microscope. This uses a beam of electron, so we could see it like this. But scanning is pretty cool because the beam of electrons shows a 3D type of structure, but you can't see inside of these structures though. There are artifacts. Artifacts are these distortions, things that don't normally appear in real life, so that will occur when you do these sections, because you have to sometimes freeze the organs, and by freezing the organs, it causes distortions and stuff. There are other imaging technologies that we have. One is using X-rays, and X-rays, they will go through soft tissue and is absorbed by denser organs like our bones. Okay. CTs are this using it as these transverse sections of the body, so we could see it, the soft tissue as well. But when we use angiograms, we use an injection. Okay, when we use it's imaging, not imagining. Sorry about that. Imaging. That's a good catch on that one. Yeah, it's imaging, not imagining. Okay, so angiogram, we use contrast. We inject contrast to be able to look at the blood vessels within them. For PET, they use these radioactive isotopes. And then what ends up happening, we get to see the parts of our body that has a lot of activity. This is very important to look at whether it's studies of the brain or to look at a growing tumor, because a growing tumor will be very active. It's called the peritoneum for the abdominal pelvic cavity. Ultrasounds or sonographs, they use high frequency of sound waves. And by doing that, we could end up producing an image. This is a lot safer compared to all these other imaging techniques. But there are still some risks, but I'm just saying it is safer for compared to all these other ones here. And then there's MRIs, right? MRIs, they instead uses the hydrogen within our body, the water in our body, and they use magnetic fields to kind of be able to project these images for us to see. All right, we don't have time for that. So what I need you to do before you leave, okay, is one thing is, I am planning to do like a workshop every week. I'll probably do the workshop for tomorrow's office hours, but I do need you to fill out the survey so I could see what will be the best time for you And remember, when you fill out the survey, please fill it out in the sense that this is for both enrolled and waitlisted. And what I want you to do when you fill out the survey, select all the ones that you can participate in. I'm not saying to guarantee for you, it's all optional, right? But select the ones that you could potentially participate in. Don't just select one, okay? Select all of them that you could actually go into, okay? So go ahead and click on this link in the chat, fill it out. This is how I take roll as well. So if you don't end up doing these surveys or these in-class assignments, it will be marked absent. So make sure you do that, okay? Whether you are enrolled or not, please do that one. And for those of you, I do have office hours right after class today. So if you want to stay for office hours, great. For those of you on Thursday lab, I'll see you tomorrow. And for those of you on Monday's lab, make sure you could try to, if you could, go to next week's Tuesdays or Thursdays lab as well.
Professor?
Yes.
What time was the Wednesday lab again?
Wednesday, we don't have a Wednesday lab unless you're coming to my night class, but that would be at 6:50 p.m.
Could I attend that if I can't make Tuesday and Thursday?
Yeah, you could attend that if you want to. Yeah.
Okay.
We might be covering slightly different things because we have a different track of doing things, but you could still attend that if you want.
Professor?
Professor?
Yes. I don't know.
I am not assigned in any of the labs. Which one should I assist?
Which one you're trying to get into?
Whichever one you have space in. I really don't have an option.
I guess in that case scenario, just select Thursday's lab, I guess.
Thursdays? Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Professor, where was the link?
Yeah, Alex.
I was saying, where was the link you said that we were going to do some kind of a survey for today?
Yeah, I'll link it again. Oh, did it not link in the first place? I don't know. Did everyone get that?
Wait, I can't find the link to the survey you're talking about.
Okay, I'm putting it in chat.
Oh, okay, cool.
Would you be able to post Tuesday or Thursday the lab video on our Monday lab, where the lectures on our lab videos are at? Or do we
Can you say that again? It was pretty soft. I could barely hear you.
would you be able to post the Tuesday or Thursday the lab video on our Monday lab where we have all of our videos?
Yeah, it's the exact same stuff that we go over. So sometimes I would just post one of the labs, just so that it's because we cover this. Oh, you're saying next week? You're saying, right? Yes, definitely. I'll post that up.
Okay, so we could be fine if we don't attend the Tuesday.
Yeah, if you missed it, you could find that video and take a look at it. Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Professor, the link that you sent on the chat says that it's only for people that are waitlisted.
No, it's for both. It should be for both.
Okay, it just said that when I clicked on it.
Yeah, and then
really?
it asked if you're enrolled or not, so I was confused too. I'm assuming it's one, right?
Yeah, disregard the waitlisted part. Okay, so if you are enrolled, just say this
You're
is
enrolled.
for both waitlisted and enrolled. Okay. Yeah, sorry. I'll take that out. Thank you for telling me. I'll take that out.
And we're good to go once we finish this.
Yeah, once you finish with that, you're good to go. Yeah, I'll see you.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, take care. Have a good one.
You too.
Professor?
Yes.